Hello, History of Medicine students. This is Professor Bowen here with a video on how to complete the second stage of your research project, which is a bibliography of secondary sources. Now that you have submitted and received some comments on your research proposals, you are ready to proceed to the next stage of things. But you might be wondering, what exactly is a secondary source? How do I find these secondary sources, and what am I supposed to submit for this part of the project? These are all questions I'm going to address in this short video. The instructions for the assignment are this. You have to find 7 different scholarly works related to your topic and specifically that address the research question that you posed in your proposal. Once you find those 7 secondary sources, you'll then put together a Works Cited page. This is basically a bibliography that just lists all of your sources, all 7 of them, in accordance with Chicago footnote style. And then once you do that, you'll submit your bibliography, which is due by the end of the day on Sunday, September 20th. So first off, let me say a little bit about what a secondary source is, because this might be a new term for some of you. When historians talk about secondary sources, basically what they mean is sources created in our time, in the contemporary period, in the era that we live in right now. Historians make a basic division between secondary sources, which come from our time, and primary sources, which come from the time period that we're studying. So you'll need to find secondary sources for this part of your project, that is, scholarly writings in which the author analyzes primary source materials from the time period that they are studying. That could include things like books, journal articles, and chapters from edited volumes. When you find secondary sources, you want to make sure that you are using academic writings. Typically, those are published either by university presses or trade presses that publish scholarly writings. One thing you want to make sure of when you're looking for secondary sources is that you're finding things written by historians. Specifically, in a history of medicine class, you might run into lots of articles and books written by doctors or various kinds of medical professionals or scientists. You want to stay away generally from that kind of content and focus on things written by academic historians. And one tip that I have here to make sure that you are finding stuff written by historians is when you find a source that you think might work for your project, it would help you to do a little research on the author. Find out where they work. Are they in a history department at a university, for example? Do they have documented expertise in some area of the history of medicine? Answering those questions will help you determine whether or not you've actually got a professional historian who is your author and not some other kind of academic. Finally, you want to make sure that the sources you locate are peer-reviewed. And basically what we mean by that is sources that have been vetted and approved by other professional historians. And that would include things like professional journal articles, books, chapters from edited volumes. It would not include, typically, blog posts, newspaper articles, videos, documentaries, or anything else that doesn't have any footnotes or references. If you have questions about exactly what counts, of course, you can always ask me. So now that we know a little bit about what a secondary source is, the next question we have to tackle is, okay, so how do I go and find these? I tend to use Google Scholar as the go-to place at the beginning of a research project. Google Scholar is really great because they're basically a huge digital warehouse of academic publications. You have to be a little bit careful, though, in the way that you use this search engine because it contains records of publications from all across the different corners of academia. So you'll find not only things written by historians, but also by biologists, by sociologists, by other kinds of academics whose research might not be that useful for this project, which is historical in nature. So when going to Google Scholar, one of the things that you might find helpful to do is to start just by choosing keywords like history and medicine before entering your specific topic. That might help narrow it down a little bit to ensure that you're getting stuff that is written, that is historical and that's produced by historians. And when you find a source that you think might work for you, one of the interesting things that you can do with Google Scholar often, but not always, is find the actual source. Sometimes these are just available for you on the internet as downloadable PDF files. For example, in my hypothetical research project here, I am interested in the history of medicine and its relationship with gender in Chinese history. And so I found this source called Body, Gender, and Disease, the Female Breast in Late Imperial Chinese Medicine. And luckily for me, it does have a link that I can click to, which brings me right to the article. Of course, I still have to ask myself, is this something that's good for my research? Does it actually address the kind of question that I'm asking? In order to do that, I should click on that article, and what I do when I do that is it'll come up. Now, sometimes when you look through the article, it'll begin with a nice little abstract that basically tells you what the author's research question is, what their main argument is. They might say something a little bit about the sources or the historiographical significance of their study. If it has an abstract like that, often just by reading that one paragraph, you'll know whether or not this is good for your project. And if it is, you include it in your list of sources. If it's not, you can throw it away and move on and look for something else. Not all articles have abstracts, though, and if you find that the one that you've clicked on, the one that you've pulled up, doesn't have that, my suggestion would be not just to read through the whole thing, because that might be too time-consuming, but to go to the conclusion. There's usually a section in every article that is just called conclusion, and that will give you, I hope, enough information about the rest of the piece to determine how workable it is for your research. So read that conclusion or the abstract, get a sense of whether or not it works. If it does, great. If not, you can keep looking for something else. Also, sometimes it may not be possible to pull up an electronic version of the article just from Google Scholar. In those cases, my suggestion would be to go to our library website and specifically click on the interlibrary loan link, which is under the Services tab, and which takes you to this form that you can fill out, which will basically send out a request to libraries all around the world for that article or book chapter or whatever it is. Once you fill out that form, which requires you to put in information about the author, about the title, about when it was published and where, sometimes page numbers, usually within a couple days, you'll be able to get that article or whatever it is. They'll send it to you by email. It'll just show up in your inbox. You can download it, you can print it, you can save it, whatever you want to do. It's right there for you to use. So please do use Interlibrary Loan if you find that you can't access things directly through Google Scholar. And there is the Interlibrary Loan form. You can also send interlibrary loan requests for book chapters. One of the cool things I noticed when I started this hypothetical research project is that the author of the first article that I found also has a book on the topic. And sometimes in Google Scholar, you can actually click on the name of the author and it'll show you everything else that they have written. In this case, I found that the author wrote a book called Reproducing Women: Medicine, Metaphor, and Childbirth in Late Imperial China. And I thought, oh, that might also be an important source for my research. Maybe there's another article or chapter that I can pull out from them for my bibliography. So I clicked on that link in Google Scholar, and I scrolled through the first couple pages of the book until I got to the table of contents. And if I wanted, I could send an ILL request for any of these chapters. You fill out the information the same way on the NU Interlibrary form on the library website. And again, if some library around the world has it and they can make a digitized PDF of it for you, they will send it to you usually within 2 to 3 days. Okay, so by this point in my hypothetical research here, I've got 1, maybe 2 good sources for my project, but I need some more. So one option for you that you can use on Google Scholar, there's this really powerful feature called Cited By. You may have seen this or used this before. If you look at the area that I've circled right here, you can see that this particular book, Reproducing Women, has been cited by 107 different authors, which means they've used part of this author's work in some way, shape, and form in their own scholarship. And if I click on that Cited By link, you'll be taken to a page which just lists all of those 107 sources. This is a good way to kind of fill out your bibliography and find other things that are related to the topic that you started with that you could include. Some of these are not going to be that helpful. You do have to kind of scroll through. But once you find something that you think might work for you, you do the same thing. You just click on the article, see if there is a electronic version available for you. If not, you can go back to the NU Library website and fill out the ILL form. But use that Cite By feature as a way of kind of narrowing down the search parameters so that you do get things that are closely related to the scholarship that you started off with. In terms of other places to go for sources, if you get stuck, if you're not finding a lot on Google Scholar, one place you might want to go is just search for some of the top tier journals in medical history. The history of medicine is a well-established field, so there are lots of great journals. Some of them are general, some of them deal with specific topics. And if you go to the website for any of these journals, you'll find that you can actually look through the table of contents for issues, in some cases going back like 10 and 20 years. And these journals publish on all different kinds of topics, and they're all peer-reviewed. Anything that you find in any of these journals, like Bulletin of History of Medicine, Social History of Medicine and Allied Sciences, Early Science in Medicine, History of Psychiatry, anything that you find in there would be a guaranteed approved source for your research project. So just looking through individual publications in journals is a good way to find sources as well. One other thing I would recommend is looking for syllabuses. Professors often post their syllabuses online, and you can download these as well and look through them. Often you can find syllabuses on much more specific topics within the history of medicine. So to go again with my example, right, I was interested in the history of reproductive medicine in Imperial China, and I just did a quick Google search, History of Medicine, China. I popped it in, and I found this course, which was taught a few years ago, actually in 2006, by Professor Marta Hansen. It's just History of Chinese Medicine from Antiquity to the Present. It was taught at Johns Hopkins University. And scrolling through the syllabus, which is a 10 or 12 page document, I found a number of sources on this subject. Sources that I had not encountered before, like the one that I've circled right here. So then I can go back to Google Scholar, search for that, read the abstract or the conclusion of the article, and see, does it actually work for what I'm doing? All right, the last thing I want to talk about is citing sources. This is a really easy thing to do, again, thanks to Google Scholar. Once you find an article or a book that you want to use for your project, all you need to do is click on that little quote link at the bottom. I've circled it here on the screen, and that will take you to a page that displays that article cited in a variety of forms. And the one that you want is the one that says Chicago. And that's it. You do that 7 times for your sources, and voila, you've got your bibliography.